Hey, welcome to the Social 333 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bentley. Today, my guest is Kurt Benson. Kurt, how are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and what you got going on.
Kurt Benson, founder and CEO of Title League. We're a sports and entertainment podcast network, really at the center of the creator economy, athlete-driven content. Company is going into its 8th year.
That's really cool because I actually reached out to some athletes about being on the podcast. They have some good stuff that they're kind of going on. It seems like a lot of, and you can kind of quote me on this, but it seems like a lot of retired athletes kind of get into entrepreneurship pretty quickly. Like they'll figure out that, hey, look, like, I don't think I'm the guy to be working at a local gas station. Like I might have to like create a company. So, because they're a public face for the most part that are, retired athletes. And they just can't go work at, Subway. They have to go work somewhere that is a little more private.
Definitely.
And I think podcasting is a really good way for their voice to get out because there's a lot of stuff that, like, for example, I don't know if I quite watch a lot of football, but I know a lot about football. I've been playing football since I got into high school and I've been following it. I know, schemes and calls, different stuff. And I just don't know the business side of it. And I recently heard something or read something on ESPN where a former New York Jets player, they got involved with more of like the back office stuff and they realized that it really wasn't for them. And then they ended up getting into like law enforcement after they did a couple entrepreneurial things. What have you really seen with, retired athletes or athletes that are, maybe even still playing ball? Like I know a couple that still play ball and still have podcasts. What have you kind of seen with that?
So it's two parts to the question. Like the first is athletes don't have typical working career that the everyday person has. Most athletes retire in their late 20s or early 30s. And there's still a lot of life to live. And if you are the 1% of the 1% that's made in excess of 9 figures, then yeah, you probably never need to work again. But the majority of athletes that have a 3 to 5 year career will still have to work in their lives. So, when you retire, all of a sudden now you got to figure out how to go out and make a living. And for most athletes, from the time that they were born, they've probably been working on their craft. So then to be, call it 28 years old and now get a normal job is extremely difficult. The other part of that is extremely tough is now they realize how hard it is to make $100,000 in an entire year. Maybe they were making $250,000 biweekly. Now they got to realize how hard it is to make that in an entire year. So that's a huge adjustment. We work with a lot of athletes that are both active and on the way looking at retirement or retired. On the way over here, I was just speaking to someone. They said, do you work with college athletes? And we typically don't like working with college athletes because at that age, you're still trying to figure out life. You're still trying to keep the main thing. And if you are looking at the professional leagues, you want to make sure that you can get your foot in the door and then stay in without any distractions. So for us, we're looking at seasoned athletes that are either in the middle or tail end of their careers, or athletes that have just newly retired, athletes that have played on winning teams, athletes that have a ton of experience and are comfortable in their own skin to speak about things very passionately and transparently. So, that's the way that we approach it and how we identify key athletes to work with.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of athletes that I've reached out to don't really understand like the business side of stuff. That's not a knock against any of them. It's just that they've been playing ball for so long and that's all they've done is play ball. Is then when somebody approaches them about a business idea or something that's, beneficial, like running a podcast or something like that and being a guest, they have people like PR people and stuff like that. They just are kind of frozen because they don't really, it's not something that's in their wheelhouse. And it's like they have to, ask because they're at that level, or it's just, they just have no idea, like how it works. And it's kind of, just an experience for them. I think we all have experiences where it's just like something got kind of tough quickly and you're just like, whoa, like how did that happen? And you kind of learn from it, which is really, really cool. And I'm sure they experience that and going to pro leagues and stuff like that. Talk to me about, because I've seen this too, where, and you can kind of quote me on it, is that the celebrity movement with photos, videos, um, just anything with pro athletes is like huge right now. Going out, let's say I go out and I meet, I don't know, retired or non-retired pro athlete, get photos, stuff like that, get them to endorse a brand, something like that, is really, really big right now.
I mean, people love athletes. Live sports is one of the only things that still drives viewership, and obviously it's driving billion-dollar valuations in these leagues. So athletes are at the center of a lot of people's interests. You got to think, I mean, we've all grown up watching sports. You end up having your favorite athletes. So they control and yield a lot of influence. So for us, when we're looking at an athlete, we understand that. And ultimately, if you have the right athlete that has that influence, they're able to build scale in the audience. And once you're able to build that and repeat it, you can build a very strong business. So when athletes are looking at this space, really it's a creator economy, because podcasting has evolved and changed so much in the last 10 years. Anyone can be a creator today. Whether you're successful with audience scale or not is a completely separate question. Athletes have a leg up on most people because of who they are and what they've done on the court or on the field. So there's tremendous opportunity. And if they're in it for the right reasons, they want to build a sustainable business, there's really, I mean, no limits. You look at the Kelsey brothers, and they licensed a 9-figure deal to Amazon. You look at the NBA space. That's a space that we primarily play in. I'm wearing their shirt. It says To the Baja. It's a live sports show hosted by 3 former NBA vets. It streams 4 days a week, and they're at the center of live streaming. So there's so much opportunity, and brands are so interested in it. They want to align with athletes. And this is the closest thing to being on the court, but still associated with an athlete.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about To the Baja, because I think athlete stories get really, because I read a lot on ESPN. It's kind of like one of my gateways to kind of, escape working for a minute and just kind of focus on something else. I'm sure a lot of other people are the same way. They go, watch games at Buffalo Wild Wings or something, right? They just going to escape their lives and enjoy 2 or 3 hours with their friends and, live sports. So I read like articles, and one of the coolest things I like to read is like a story about like how they got to the pro leagues, or stuff happening behind the scenes, or even like they retired and now look at what they're doing, which is the one I was talking about before on ESPN, with the New York Jet receiver. I thought all that stuff was really cool, and I think it's really inspirational for a lot of the younger generation that's kind of coming up right now, for a lot of them to read or listen to these stories where they're like, hey, I got cut during this thing, or I used to be a D-back and now I switched to receiver and now I'm in the Hall of Fame, or I got into an altercation with my girlfriend at the time and I got arrested, and now, my stock for the draft plummeted and I still ended up going in like the 7th round, but yet I'm headed to the Hall of Fame. I play with these people, So I think a lot of those stories need to come to light more, and I think podcasting is a really good way for people to listen to some of that stuff and be like, hey, like I'm in the same boat. Like I got some problems. Maybe I'm going to be going in the NFL draft or the NBA draft. And hey, like if I go a couple rounds, it's cool. Like I still have the opportunity to be a Hall of Fame player. Like I still have, different stuff. And I think that's a really good platform for people to really talk about their story.
I mean, I agree. It's a perfect place anyone can create today. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like 10, 20 years ago, if you wanted to create, there were so many barriers to entry. Technology wasn't where it is today. You had to be a big studio. You needed, just the immense capital and production costs that were behind it. So today, I mean, anyone can just start with their cell phone and start creating content. And now the fact that athletes are able to be in front and control their narrative goes so much further. The days of Stephen A. Smith on First Take, those you're going to see less of, because athletes are now at the power of, their future when it comes to media. And the majority of fans want to hear directly from the athletes. When you think about some of the most successful, most winning teams, I mean, whether it's Jordan's Bulls, people would love to have that fly on the wall experience of what was it like in those locker rooms? What was the perspective like between MJ, Scotty, Dennis? I mean, there's just so many of those rich stories, and if you've played in the big leagues for 10 plus years, you've got tons of those stories. So that's the way that we always look at it is, people want to hear that, and we want to be able to provide and be the conduit to those stories.
Yeah, like Last Dance was really good. I'm a big Michael Jordan fan. I watched the Bulls, and like I'm sure everybody in I'm 47, so everybody during that time was watching the Bulls and rooting for the Bulls. Or hopefully, I don't know, but and he got like the iPad, and like something would happen, and he would just sit there and like laugh and be like, "Yeah, okay, whatever."
Amazing.
And he would tell like a story, like the flu game, like he was talking about that game and what really happened. So I think like a lot of that stuff. Not only is it like good entertainment for somebody that's like me that enjoys that kind of stuff, but it's also really good, I think, for other people to listen to some of that stuff.
I would say so. Another one of our NBA properties is Out the Mud with Zach Randolph and Tony Allen. Those two guys had the most of their success with the Memphis Grizzlies.
Mhm.
They created the grit and grind. That team had a ton of success, but never won a championship.
Right.
And they always ran into the Spurs with Tim Duncan. And then at the end of it, when they were getting past the Spurs, then they were running into the new age Golden State Warriors. But to speak to Zach and Tony and have those perspectives of what it was like during that grit and grind era is truly special, and people love it. But then the other side of it is someone like Zach Randolph played 17 years in the NBA and averaged almost 20 and 10 his entire career. So he's so respected. And then you think about Tony Allen on the defensive side, whether it was Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant, the list goes on. They all revere him as the greatest defender. So you've got amazing stories that are always being brought to life. And like you said, with Michael Jordan, looking at The Last Dance and the iPad, those just spark all those memories, and they're the best people to speak about him. When we move away from the NBA, we've had a lot of success in the track and field space from a Olympic 100-meter standpoint. You think about Usain Bolt, Justin Gatlin, Johan Blake, Asaf Apal, like the 5 fastest humans of all time. We've worked with them very closely. And when they're going back and rewatching those races, whether you think about Rio, whether you think about 2012 in London, whether you think about 2008 in Beijing, some of the most amazing stories that come from that, because they had 9 seconds to really define their greatness. And it's not like they had 4 quarters or 2 halves. They had to wait 4 years for that moment. So when people hear those stories from those athletes, it just goes so much further.
Yeah, those stories have to be crazy. Also, like, going to a totally different country and then having those 9 seconds.
9 seconds. If you screw up or you have any sort of performance anxiety, you're a millisecond off the line, a little bit slower than you typically are, your race is done. And you can't get it back next quarter. You got to wait 4 years. That's just the ultimate like clutch gene, which is just outrageous.
Let's see. What else I was going to talk to you about? I probably really got away from it. Talk to me a little bit about just dealing with the egos that kind of come through. So a lot of people, I'm sure, like, depending on the success that they had, or, I've experienced a lot, because a lot of them come up, since they were very, very small, like Pee Wee leagues small, knowing that like they're going to be the best. I had a guest talking about Mike Tyson, and I'm a huge fan of Mike Tyson, of his older years, or I guess his younger years. And some of the stuff that he was talking about, where he was like, people would ask him, how did you know that you were going to be, that good? And like, and Customato was telling him you're going to be the greatest of all time and all this other stuff. But they were like, how did you know? Like, how did you really feel that you're going to be, the greatest of all time? And he was like, I don't know. Like, I just kept fighting and nobody would beat me. So I knew it was going to be great. And that was his response. And like, everybody else was like, oh, like, it's because of my technical skills, or I ran, at 4 a.m. instead of 5, like a lot of other people would just be like, oh, I just had this like natural gift or whatever. He was just like, no, like I would just beat the crap out of people, anybody that came in front of me. And I knew I was going to be the greatest of all time. Like, I'm sure you deal with like a lot of ego where people just don't want to accept a certain fate, or they think that they can bend it because, they've been bending it for so long. What really happens in your space when things just don't go right as planned for a lot of people? Do they just kind of shake it off, or they continue on with the process?
So there are many athletes like that. And when you've been catered to your entire life, I mean, you're a product of that. So for us, we spend a lot of time doing our due diligence and vetting. Not every athlete is right for us, and we're not right for every athlete. So when we are identifying who these athletes that are essentially going to become our business partners on these projects, we spend a lot of time telling them why it may not work, why it may fail. And we're quickly able to remove candidates that don't fit our model and our culture and what we're trying to build. And when I look at our portfolio today of all our athlete partners, I mean, we have some of the best in the world when it comes to just integrity, the way that they treat people, their work ethic. And at the end of the day, yes, they've had a lot of success in their profession and they've made a lot more money than the everyday person, but they're still stand-up people. They show up every single day and they work extremely hard. So we pride ourselves on working with the best when it comes to that. Our first athlete that we signed was Kurt Benson in 2022. He was playing with the Dallas Mavericks. They went to the Western Conference Finals that year. Theo was the guy on the bench that brought energy. He was the guy that was clapping, standing up for his teammates. He was the guy in the locker room that everyone loved. But he wasn't on the court making the biggest contribution next to Luka, but he was working his tail off on the back end. But what Theo was able to do over his NBA career was he developed the best relationships. Everyone loved him. So when he stepped into the world of podcasting, although he didn't have the career of a Luka, KD, he had this incredible ability to build trust and relationships with his peers. And he's now, 3 years later, still with us, and he's built an incredible media portfolio. He's become a great personality in the space. And he's just a testament to, you don't need to be a 10-time All-Star to have a great career outside of what you did in the NBA. And then outside of that, we have All-Stars and all WNBA future Hall of Famers that we work with that are also so amazing. So we will not work with an athlete if that athlete feels like they're bigger than what they're trying to build. And if that athlete doesn't want to be in the trenches building with us, then we're probably not the right fit. If you want to be contracted as a host or contracted as talent, there is Amazon Prime, there's ESPN. Those platforms exist for that reason.
The last question I have for you is social media, and the biggest one is Twitter. So I've seen a lot of people that are either guests or podcasters, whatever the situation is, really get into it. Like Katie will get into it with someone, and he'll just really I watched some articles, or I read some articles about how he really actually really enjoys haters that are on his page, because he'll call them out in a second, and it's kind of like an entertainment thing for him. But I've also seen where like a Stephen A. Smith will probably push something out on Twitter and get a reaction from people, and that'll kind of drive the followers and the likes and the dislikes and all that stuff. Are you kind of seeing that with what you got going on too? Is a lot of people the athletes will push on Twitter, maybe get into a little bit of a beef here and there, to kind of drive up the thing? Because I mean, it works.
Listen, it's a world of engagement,
right?
A lot of you got to have such thick skin, because it's so easy to just pick on someone online.
Right.
And athletes get picked on all the time. And a lot of athletes say they don't necessarily see it, but it's so hard not to see it. And then when you are in the media space, you see it even more, because that's the world you're in. So, on To the Baja, I think about, Charlie Villanueva. Charlie V has done an incredible job building out his online and social media presence. And he loves that type of energy and feedback, because he'll dive into the comments and he'll dish it right back. But he's also very confident in his own skin and his ability to walk away and not be bothered by it. So, there's a time and place for it. There's obviously people that completely cross the line. And you just have to realize that person is not in the same room as you. They're just being a troll online. And at the end of the day, it drives engagement.
Yeah, it's really one of the toughest things, I think, that a lot of people overlook when they get into the social media space or creating podcasts or just being exposed, is the hatred. I mean, it could be anything. It could be my haircut.
It's negative.
Yeah.
I mean, we work with active athletes, and as soon as you have a bad game, well, you're too focused on your podcast. And we see that a lot. And it is extremely tough because people think that because this individual is building something off the field or off the court, it's a distraction. But athletes have a lot of time. If they're not playing and they're not practicing, they're sitting at home.
Right.
So whether someone's playing Call of Duty or hosting a podcast, it's not necessarily taking away from what they're building on the court. So people are so misconstrued, and it's just easy to look at that and say it's a scapegoat and say, someone like Paul George stopped doing his podcast because there was just so much negativity around it.
I didn't know that.
If you're going to do it, just keep building it. And ultimately, you just can't let that outside noise deter from what you're trying to build.
I agree. I've gotten some heat here and there. I think it's kind of funny, but at the same time,
we're all human, and that's I don't know if I could necessarily be in that light because it's so easy to say, oh, it wouldn't bother me. But as soon as someone says something to you online, it's easy because it just jacks you up. I mean, we have feelings, we care.
Right. I think the thing that would probably get me the most is out doing something, like at the grocery store or Walmart or something, and minding my own business, and somebody comes up to me and says, hey, X, Y, and Z, and I would just be like, dude, I'm sure that would bother me probably the most. But if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, Kurt, maybe wanted to learn more about maybe starting a podcast, maybe wanted to learn more about, some of the stuff that you got going on, where would they find you?
You can find us at TitleLeague.com. You can find us at any of Title League's handles on Instagram. You can catch me on LinkedIn. But ultimately, if you're interested in the space, you want to learn more about the creator economy, you're interested in building your own media business, feel free to reach out.
Kurt, I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you. Likewise, Chris.
Awesome.